Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, AthenaHealth Unbreaks Healthcare by Modernizing Their Data Stack. Today's webinar is presented by Looker and our partner, Snowflake. We have three fantastic presenters today. First, we are joined by Greg Joondeph-Breidbart. He is a Senior Manager of Data Engineering at AthenaHealth. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you.
We are also joined by Saqib Mustafa, the Head of Alliance Marketing at Snowflake. Welcome, Saqib.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Of course, it's great to have you. And lastly, we're joined by Looker's Norris Haddad, the Head of Technology Alliances at Looker. Hi, Norris.
Hi, everyone.
Great. So before we dive in today, just to give you a little information on what we'll be talking about. First, we'll get an overview of both the technologies, both Snowflake and Looker, just to give you a little bit of context. And then we'll really let Greg drive the most of this conversation because that's really what you're here for. And he'll be talking about how AthenaHealth has unbroken the healthcare system with those two technologies. At the end, we'll be doing Q&A. You should see a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your console. If you don't see that there is a menu at the bottom that will have a little widget marked Q&A. Feel free to pop that open. You can send in questions throughout the entire broadcast, and we'll answer them at the end. Additionally, we are recording this webinar, and we will send you the recording and the slides tomorrow. All right, so before we dive into content, I thought we'd just give a little bit of an overview of who we have today. So what interests you to join us today? Was it cloud analytics as a key initiative for us, thinking about deploying an analytics solution, learning how others in the industry have deployed in data analytics, or considering alternative to currently deployed data warehouse and big data analytics? All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Saqib, and he is going to walk us through the results.
Thank you very much, Elena. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And let's have a look at the results. So this is really interesting. I think all of you want to learn from somebody who's done it before and are considering alternatives to legacy data warehouses and big data analytics platforms. So this is a great discussion, sets up the conversation really well for all of us. I think that is what we're here to learn about. So starting with Snowflake. Snowflake is a data warehouse built for the cloud. We built it to accommodate all sorts of data and to make it very simple. So we built it from the scratch, set up for the cloud itself. We built it using a complete SQL framework. So it's a complete SQL database. It requires zero management, so you don't have to manage the keys, or you don't have to manage indexes or do sharding or vacuuming of stuff. It does it as a software as a service for you. Then on top of it, it accommodates all your data in one place. And because Snowflake is super concurrent, it provides all that data very easily to all your users, including applications such as Looker, which enables all the users to look through and query it really easily. And then, in a true statement of cloud, right, we are a pay-as-you-use service. So you only pay for what you use. And at the end of the day, you can shut it down if you want to, and you won't be paying for it. So, really built for the cloud as a service data warehouse. So when you talk about a complete SQL database, well, why would we do this? Well, we did this to leverage existing skill sets and tools, which are very readily available throughout the industry. Millions of users know these tools which are available to SQL analysts, custom applications. These might be data-driven or embed applications. These might be data which is pushed out to data scientists, or just BI and analytical tools. And so, SQL is the lingua franca of the industry, and it's very popular. You don't need to, drive complex Java jobs because of it. It's just known to millions and millions of users and analysts. So now talking about the Snowflake difference. Frankly, we wanted to create a data warehouse where we would provide the three major pillars of data warehousing inside the cloud. First of all is performance. You have to have performance, and we do provide significant performance upgrade compared to your legacy data warehouses or even some cloud data warehouse options, and at a multi-petabyte scale. In terms of concurrency, you should be able to serve out these analytics and this data set to all your users without any performance degradation. So removing the data struggle between different departments. At the end of the day, you should be querying data at the same time as loading data, at the same time as different departments inside your environment are querying the data and not losing any performance for it. And then simplicity. Frankly, simplicity is a very important part just because you don't want to concentrate on managing the environment. You want to concentrate on driving results from the environment. So we are a fully managed pay-as-you-go sort of a model. And how do we make all of this happen? Well, we created this new multi-cluster shared data architecture. And so we based it on top of centralized storage, which is basically storage on top of AWS. So the storage itself, we utilize this S3 in the background, which is super scalable. So, it's instant, it's automatically scalable, it's super elastic. Then we built, compute on top of it. So you can load data, you can do ad hoc analytics, you can do development side by side while you are actually attaching it all to the same storage and thus to all the same data. And then we built a services layer on top of it to make sure that you have optimization, management, transaction management, security, which is a very important part of this discussion, and metadata management. At the end of the day, Snowflake is a HIPAA compliant environment, and so security, we take it very seriously, and we built it from the scratch for our whole cloud-based environment. So what are we here for? What we want to be able to do is combine all your diverse data and analytical apps in one place so that we can serve out all of this data to different users and collect it from different sources and be able to serve it out to all your users in one place and serve out your analytical needs. And that is what we've done with our great partner Looker at AthenaHealth. So, we are 100% based in the cloud, and we want to be able to scale to the size of your data rather than you trying to reduce your data to scale inside us. So with that, I'll move on to, I'll pass it on to Looker, but before that, let me pull up our poll question, our second poll question for today. So, in analyzing the data sources you work with today, can you tell us a little bit about the sort of data sources you're looking at? These could be customer-facing mobile applications, traditional applications, or machine data or weblog data from your websites. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nora Sadat from Looker, and he'll take you over the poll results.
Thank you, Saqib. Let's look at the results from you, the audience. So interesting. So in terms of data sources that you're analyzing today, most of you are looking at traditional applications, so probably data sources on-premise or in your own environment, and then followed by machine learning, machine data, and then customer-facing applications. Super interesting. So I'm going to start off with a few short slides to give you a sense of how Looker approaches data and analytics. I think it's pretty different from the way other tools do it, and it'll give some helpful context for Greg's talk. So as Saqib described, data technology has changed tremendously, and that's obviously true over the last 20 years, but it's true even over the last 5 years. It used to be databases were very expensive and they were very slow. They probably lived in your data center, and those facts define the way that businesses use data. But that's not true anymore. Databases today are incredibly fast, they're getting cheaper and cheaper, and lots of them live in the cloud. And that means that those old constraints no longer apply. It's really a whole new world when it comes to analytics. But while databases have evolved, analytical tools haven't really. The tools that we use to access and make sense of that data have largely stayed the same in terms of architecture. They're still stuck in that world of slow, expensive databases, and that prevents companies from getting the value that they want from their data. So what we see over and over again when we talk to customers is that this causes one of two problems mainly. One thing we see all the time is what we call a data bottleneck. There's really only one team, or sometimes just one person, that can access the data, so every question has to go through them. So every time that they need data gets in line. And this is, obviously terribly frustrating for the people waiting in line, but frankly, it's also frustrating for the analysts too, because they have better things to do than write the same SQL or tweaking it over and over again for these custom requests. What happens is people stand in line once, they stand in line twice, and by the third time they're sick of waiting, they just go and make the decision that they have to make without consulting the data. And the other thing that happens, usually because people get fed up with the data bottleneck, is what we call data chaos. People slice off, part of the data that's most relevant to them, whatever they can get their hands on. Maybe they're in finance and they save a bit of finance data on their laptop, and then they do the analysis themselves in a workbook environment or a spreadsheet. And this seems better because at least they're not waiting in line, and everything's fine until they get in a meeting with someone from another department. And that person has a totally different analysis. Now the whole meeting, instead of making strategy and looking at results, is spent trying to debug the analyses and to figure out who has the right answer. So what you really want is the best of those two worlds. You want all of the trustworthiness that comes with everyone using standardized definitions of your business metrics, but without losing the ability for people to self-serve or to answer their own questions with data. Right? Because fundamentally, you want to enable everyone to make better decisions. And that's only going to happen if everyone can ask questions from the data directly and get reliable, correct answers without having to wait in line. And the problem is, older architectures just weren't able to find that middle ground. But many companies have figured that out, and these are companies that Looker and Snowflake are working with, like AthenaHealth. Some of them are newer companies, Hotel Tonight, Fitbit, Kixeye, which are able to deploy modern data architecture the first time around. But lots are, older companies like Telagis, part of Verizon, or The Orchard, or PDX, in a variety of different industries that have worked with numerous technologies over the years, but have realized, that there's, with new workloads, they're able to employ the newest technology. And so I'm about to I'll hand it over to Greg in a second, but I wanted to show you how Looker does this that's different from other solutions in the marketplace. First of all, with Looker, your data stays in your database. You don't have proprietary analytics engine. We don't extract data out of the database. You keep control of the data the entire time. Secondly, we use LookML, which is a data modeling language built on top of SQL, which is the industry standard for analysis. LookML is a way for you to create the language of your own business, or to precisely describe what your data means. And that sits at the heart of our broad data platform. Since all queries pass through that same platform, it ensures that no matter where or who is asking the question, you're always going to get the same answer, the right answer. And the way that we do this is by leveraging today's best technology. It's not the tools that were founded 15 or 25 years ago are somehow dumb or made bad choices. They were simply constrained by the technology of the time that they grew up in. And because these constraints no longer apply, we've been able to do something new. So I'll run through kind of a quick diagram of the architecture and what that looks like before I hand off to Greg. So you probably have data living in a bunch of different places, as we saw in the previous poll, and most of our customers do. You might have data in SaaS applications like Salesforce or NetSuite or Zendesk. You might have transactional databases on-premise or in the cloud. You might have an ERP system, web analytics tools, you name it, right? It used to be that you had to extract, transform, and then load that data into the warehouse. And that transformation step was usually pretty complicated and heavyweight, right? A lot of companies have dedicated teams just for this. And so what you end up with is a lot of business logic baked into that transformation, which made it pretty inflexible. Whenever you needed to change, definitions of a metric or the way certain data was looked at, you would have to go back all the way to that ETL step. But because of these fast databases, you don't need to pre-transform data anymore. You can, we have a lot of partners that we work with who will make the process of extracting all the data into a SQL database basically plug and play. Once you've done that, you can shape your data to be the way you need using today's fast and cheap databases like Snowflake to do all of the processing and storage. And that's what Looker provides. Looker is the platform that sits on top of your database. It contains all of your LookML models, which give you that governed transformation, but in a really flexible, agile way. So once your analysts have gotten the information about your data and what it means out of their heads and into Looker, that gets rid of the bottleneck. Because now everyone in your organization can answer their own questions through Looker. And they can do that using our UI, we have native D3 visualizations, and they can explore data that way. They can schedule reports so that they get, them in email, or they can get triggered alerts if data hits a certain threshold. They can embed Looker inside of another application, like Salesforce or any sort of web application, or even use our REST API to build any sort of native functionality or applications. And for example, we have a Slack bot, which lets you query data directly from Slack. And because all the questions pass through Looker, you'll always make sure to get the correct answer. So with that, let's do another quick poll, and then I'll pass it over to Greg from AthenaHealth to take over. So for your data warehouse and or big data platforms, what are the biggest pain points that you're seeing? So select any that apply here. Constantly juggling performance, management, and scaling issues. So around that kind of simplicity, difficulty in bringing in new sources of data, or current solutions costing, just costing you too much. So with that, Greg, take it away.
Great, thank you, Norris, and thank you, Sakib. All right. Okay, so interesting. So it looks like people are mostly have a big pain point with bringing in new sources of data. So I'll talk a little bit about that as part of my my introduction to Athena and what we've managed to do with Snowflake and Looker. So just to give a little bit of context and just to introduce AthenaHealth, so we're a company, we're a cloud-based healthcare services company. So our clients are doctors and medical staff at healthcare practices and health systems. So our three major lines of business are revenue cycle management. So that's billing claims for providers. So when you go to the doctor, they send a claim to your insurance. We handle that process. We have an electronic medical record, and we have a patient portal. So those are our three cloud-based lines of business. So as you can probably already imagine, we have access to a lot of very interesting data, and that's where Snowflake and Looker come in. So just to set up what our infrastructure had been, and tell you a little bit about our production infrastructure. So again, our application is cloud-based. The production infrastructure for that application is hosted in our data centers, and we have about 100 plus Oracle databases serving our application in our data centers. So you can imagine that for analysis, that makes things very tricky, because the way that our production system is laid out is that each database has a number of clients or tenants on it. And so when we want to do network analysis, we actually have to pull all of that data together. So it's a lot of data, and it can be fairly tricky to pull all that together. So our old infrastructure had essentially a homegrown ETL system that would go out in parallel to all these different Oracle databases. It would pull an aggregation of data, or rather it would pull probably about 800 different aggregations of data, and pull it all into a single Oracle database. And so over time, at the time that we really started to switch over to Snowflake, that single instance of Oracle had grown to be about 40 terabytes, which is extremely massive for a single Oracle database and really presents issues with scaling. The ETL system that we had was bringing in about 100 million rows of data daily, and again, these were largely aggregations, which is important as I talk about sort of what we've been able to switch to, because aggregations are suboptimal actually for analysis. So I just talked a little bit about our back-end system and how we were getting all of this data, all the provider data, patient data, diagnoses, claim data, et cetera, out of our production systems. How did we actually report on it? So what we had been doing was, again, we sort of had this single Oracle database that had all of the aggregations of data. And so what we really did was we had a series of a few different tools to allow the company to get access to metrics and to insights, to be able to report up to leadership and product management in terms of how different features and functionality we're doing. So it was made up of homegrown dashboards. These homegrown dashboards, were basically a combination of some HTML, sometimes some data visualization packages like D3, high charts, among a couple of other things. We had some more granular reporting applications, so just think an HTML form where someone can enter some basic parameters or filters and get a CSV of their data. And we didn't have this instrumented for everything, so you can imagine when people wanted to answer any other type of question that we didn't have an application or a dashboard for, they would actually have to go ahead and write a custom SQL query. Healthcare is a very, very complex industry, and modeling healthcare in a database is also extremely complex. So when end users would have to go and actually answer even simple business questions that we hadn't built a dashboard or report for, that could end up being thousands of lines of SQL very easily, and it would need to be QA'd, and it would need to be run across all of the instances in production, across all of that granular data. So that was a massive challenge, and really actually provided the need for us to kind of do a little bit of a cultural shift in a good way as we move to Snowflake and Looker, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So from an analysis perspective, besides the fact that we were really relying heavily on SQL and really relying heavily on folks coming into the organization knowing SQL, even if their job did not necessarily entail it, we're growing very quickly. We're gaining new clients, we're adding new lines of business, and so with that comes a much larger volume of data. And so you can imagine that as we're hitting this 40 terabyte mark with our Oracle database, query performance is outrageously slow. So this is the database that is used for analytics. It's populating the dashboards and reports I talked about before. It was not uncommon for a report or a dashboard to take half an hour to load. Because of that, we weren't really able to add very much to it. There was really no way to scale that architecture. It's very expensive, very cumbersome. We didn't really want to be in the business of managing additional Oracle machines for analytics. So that was really, the scalability piece was really just not there. And again, I talked about SQL was really, knowledge of a very intermediate to advanced knowledge of SQL was really required to be able to navigate our KPIs and metrics. So, we might have a dashboard or a report that would give you a value and maybe give you a few dimensions, but if you really wanted to drill down and understand who are the patients, what are the allergies that, we're seeing that are really causing this metric to change in a certain way, you would actually have to go and write a SQL query for that. All right, so as we're evaluating technologies for our new analytics platform, so for our brand new analytics platform, we decided that we really wanted to go with an MPP database, massively parallel database. And we wanted something that would be fully ANSI SQL compliant because people know SQL, and although we'd like to move folks away from writing a lot of custom SQL, it's still, as Sakib said, it's known by millions of people. It's something that is really ingrained within the analytics industry. So we wanted something SQL compliant. We wanted a relational database. We also wanted something that could support some unstructured or semi-structured data, which Snowflake actually can. Because we're cloud-based, we're doing some analysis with web traffic, and so being able to do some of that log analysis was big for us. And so Snowflake in particular offered a really compelling business model. And so just to kind of talk through some of that, so one of the biggest things is the separation of compute and storage. So how that really manifests in Snowflake is that I can go in and create however many warehouses, which are just compute nodes, that I want. And I can decide how I want those warehouses to behave. I can decide how I can choose a t-shirt size, essentially I think it's extra small up to 3 times extra large. And I can decide for different use cases which warehouse is appropriate. So to give you an example there, we have a separate warehouse for ETL. So all of our ETL processes go through one warehouse so that it does not disrupt end user performance on Looker, for example. Again, I mentioned it's anti-SQL compliant. We're a healthcare company. We have to abide by HIPAA. We absolutely need to have those security measures in place, and Snowflake has them. So that was a huge win for us. Snowflake is really fast. So, coming from doing analytics on Oracle, we were able to improve query performance by 50%, and actually, in some cases, we even saw over 50% performance improvement. We weren't using, sort of the precious I/O and CPU resources that we had been using with an on-premise solution. So that was huge, a huge win for us as well. And last but certainly not least, support has been incredible. They've been by our side the whole time in terms of transition. Transition has been extremely easy and very exciting. But support has been there every time we have asked a question or had an issue or needed someone to look into something. They almost always respond to us same day, and that's been extremely helpful for us. I can't speak highly enough of their support. So to move over now into Looker, so Snowflake really gave us this extremely robust backend and allowed us to get to this place where, I had mentioned aggregations before, where we could actually start to load transactional data. So to begin to build this experience of allowing end users to go from really high-level metric or KPI, really high-level trend, all the way down into the transaction or the series or set of transactions that cause that trend. So being able to see, okay, we're seeing cycle times between when a practice bills an insurance company and when they receive money, we see that going up. Let's actually drill into it, figure out which insurance companies are causing it, and go into the actual claims. That's extremely valuable to us from a process perspective. So Looker was huge here because, again, I had mentioned that our data landscape is fairly complex, given that it is modeling many different concepts in the industry. What Looker allows us to do is Looker has this really robust markup language called LookML, which Nora's talked about briefly. LookML is incredible because what we can do with it is actually abstract away from SQL. So what we're able to do is define our sets of entities and relationships between those entities. So for example, this is a patient, this is a visit, a patient has a visit, the visit has a claim, the claim has a diagnosis, etc. We're able to actually model this out in a really logical format with built-in documentation. And we're able to actually catalog all these entities directly in Looker. So Looker has a really nice IDE for development. It's very easy for folks on the team to get up to speed with it. We actually have people who aren't super technical writing LookML right now, and it's going extremely well. So that's been really helpful for us. And what we're able to do is take really complex SQL logic and turn it into something that's not very technical. So when the end user logs into Looker, they don't actually need to see any of the SQL. For power users, they actually can go in and take a look at the underlying SQL that's being generated by this LookML model, which is extremely valuable for those folks because they can actually use that as part of their QA process. So that's been really, really helpful for us. And sort of the icing on top is that all the changes that the team makes to LookML are checked into Git. So we have an on-premise GitLab instance. Everything is source controlled there. So we've actually developed a software development lifecycle around building these models, which ensures really complete accuracy of our models and allows our stakeholders to run tests of the dashboards and the reports that we're building for them in Looker before we actually deploy them to a production environment. So I talked about the back end of Looker. The front end is equally exciting. And one of the things that's so exciting about it is its simplicity. It is extremely powerful, but to an end user, to our product management teams, to our leadership team, and to others around the organization, to folks that are client-facing and need to get some stats on a client before they have that client call. Looker really provides all the functionality they need to be able to dive in deeply. So you build your model in LookML, and what that allows is the end user to actually choose a set of dimensions in what's called an Explore environment, choose a set of measures, and then pivot that data and play around with that data very similarly to how you would do it in Excel. And so I kind of describe it a little bit as Excel on steroids. So essentially, someone can, or an end user can go ahead, play around with this pivot functionality, this export functionality. They can save a report. They can actually share it. So Nora's talked about the Slack bot. We actually use that. It's very cool, and you can use that to share data. You can also just send another user a link, and that link will log that person directly into Looker and take them right to the view of data that you're looking at, so you can show someone exactly what it is that you are looking at and what you're either concerned about or a trend that you want to explore more deeply. So it gets rid of what I call like the spreadsheet problem, which is just people sending tons of versions of spreadsheets, V1 to V10 all over the organization. So the sharing is really key for us. In addition, the ability to modify the Explore interface is very flexible. So in certain views and dashboards, we've actually been able to link directly back into our own application. So for example, a claim ID might pop up, and then we can actually link that back into, have that be a link that goes right into that claim in our system, so that folks running these reports can actually start to look at examples of these trends. And again, it's sitting on top of Snowflake, which is extremely fast. So that has been really incredible. So to talk about a specific example, and really our biggest win so far with the two of these technologies together. So one of the areas that we're very focused on for our clients is AR reduction. So the way that we do that is we identify issues proactively that clients have, either using our own product or issues with certain insurance companies paying, or with denials, that type of thing. And we sort of figure out what's going on, and then we go in and we either call the insurance company or we do additional training with our client, with the practice. One of the biggest issues that we've had, though, is that understanding what is driving an increased accounts receivable at a client requires a lot of different data points. So you want to know about the different payers, you want to know about the days that certain transactions were made, certain visits happened, you want to know about the provider's specialty, where they're located, are they an MD, are they some other provider type, that type of thing. And so when we had our Oracle warehouse, we had to do a ton of different aggregations of this data, and it became extremely cumbersome to try to break out or add new dimensions to our data. What we've been able to do is actually pull in raw transactional data into Snowflake. So this is billions of rows of data into Snowflake. We've thrown a few Looker Explorers on top of it. And through that, we now have a team of over 20 users on Looker. It's a business analysis team actually diving into client AR issues. So they're able to pivot through and look at dimensions that they've never even been able to look at before, which is really incredible because now they have access to all these different fields. And so what we're doing is we're moving data from our production systems into Snowflake each day. We have plans to have a higher resolution there, so we're actually planning to have sub-daily data. And the ability to access data, it really scales to demand. So when it's peak time and more people are using the Looker dashboard, we're able to auto-scale the Snowflake warehouse to handle that. We can scale it back down to save cost when that load goes down. All that functionality comes right out of the box. So in all, it's been a really incredible transition, and we look forward to continuing down this path. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Elena for Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. All right, we've definitely gotten a couple of questions coming in. As I said, there is a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your console, so feel free to use that to send in questions as they pop up. All right, so Greg, do you use a homegrown ETL system? Have you explored any third-party ETL tools? Can you recommend any third-party ETL tools? Basically, give us a little rundown of your ETL.
Sure. So just to kind of go into why we had a homegrown system. So again, in our production environment, we have over 100 Oracle databases. And so being able to grab data in parallel was something that we needed to be able to do very quickly. And homegrown ETL systems at the time that we wrote this weren't really able to launch jobs on a whole bunch of different systems in parallel. So we do still use a homegrown ETL system right now. We are currently in the process of exploring third-party ETL tools. I know some parts of the company for other data areas that aren't product-related are using Informatica, which I've heard good things about. We're evaluating other systems right now ourselves, so stay tuned.
Cool. All right. So I guess kind of going off of that, is Looker now your primary reporting and visualization tool? There's been some word that you used other people in the past.
So Looker is now, yes, Looker is now our primary internal reporting and visualization tool. That's correct.
Fantastic. All right, so you mentioned organizing a complex data dictionary. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How, where is it defined? And then this person also wanted to know if that could account for rather lengthy definitions.
Sure. So the data dictionary is defined directly within Looker. So it's defined, Looker has a built-in IDE, which is very cool. And so it's very easy to add these entities or these models directly into Looker just using the interface. So everything's defined directly in Looker. It's defined in the LookML language, which is sort of like if you have any experience with YAML or another markup language, it's very similar to that. And it does account for very lengthy definitions. So as you can imagine, again, our data is fairly complex. So there's a few ways to handle that in LookML. One thing that we do a fair amount of is what's called a persistent derived table, where you can actually specify a SQL query that generates the base of the model. And you can have that refresh within a certain time period. You can have it refresh if any of the underlying data sources change. And then what we'll do is we'll build our models off of that persistent derived table, or PDT. So it definitely allows us the flexibility that we need to be able to account for very lengthy business definitions.
Awesome. Alrighty. So this person would like to know, is it possible to have real-time updates instead of daily ETL loads? What about pushing data instead of pulling data? So that might be for you, and then also a little bit for Saqib.
So from my perspective, yes, I know that Snowflake can handle real-time ETL. We've talked to actually a number of companies about that. We haven't instrumented it ourselves yet, but we have plans to.
Awesome. Saqib, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So one of the things, like Greg talked about, the separation of compute and storage is such a thing that it allows us to run ETL, it allows us to run ETL and, query at the same time. And from Snowflake's perspective, we use, all the industry standard tools to do ETL plus custom ETL. So you can basically bring in whatever ETL jobs you want and push them towards Snowflake. And you can keep on running ETL, so no more do you have to wait till the off hours from 5 to 9 a.m., right? You can do it as your analysts are querying the data warehouse. And you're just running the ETL workload on a separate virtual warehouse, which is connected to the same storage. So, at Snowflake, we really believe in you should be able to bring in data as you want, when you want, and serve it out to your analysts.
Cool. So, Greg, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this one a little bit and then probably pass it off to Norris. For the visualization tool, what is the difference between Looker, Power BI, and Tableau, and perhaps anything else that you guys had used?
Sure. So I think that the biggest difference, so we haven't used Power BI or Tableau a ton, a little bit. We've used Tableau a little bit. One of the things that Looker allows us to do that others haven't is it allows us to have a very flexible schema. So as we're making updates to our products and services, as we're launching new functionality or making changes, we're changing the underlying schema of our data. As something changes in the industry, if there's a new pay-for-performance program, if there's a new government mandate and we need to start collecting other information, that's a total schema change for us in the products that we then need to reflect in our analytics going forward. So what Looker's allowed us to do is to adapt very quickly to those changes with LookML and going through a software development lifecycle there. My experience with using sort of the other BI tools that you mentioned has been that they're actually quite good with visualization, but they're not quite as good at handling schemas that are changing constantly. To be honest, the visualization that's available in Looker is also really good, and it's just a lot more flexible of a tool. The others are feel fairly brittle.
Cool. Norris, do you want to take a stab at that one too?
Yeah, sure. I think Greg, hit it spot on. But what we see with customers in general that are evaluating Looker side by side with the other BI tools you mentioned, or have come to Looker having used them, is as Greg said, primarily the modeling layer. Because in Looker, they're able to describe the business logic in one central place, and if those definitions change or the schema changes, or how you want to model out, things like Greg mentioned, like what is a patient or what is a claim. If those things change at any point, and they usually do, you will change those definitions in one central place, and every single report or dashboard that is using those definitions will automatically update, right? Versus having more of a workbook model where there is no central repository of business logic, so you have to go and manually make sure that every report or workbook is using the new definitions.
Great. All right, back to you, Greg. Does AthenaHealth have clickstream analytics tools like Mixpanel or Google Analytics? And if you do you explore that data in Looker?
Oh, that's such a good question, because we're actually in the middle of digging into those tools in particular from a data collection perspective. So you actually hit on something that we're right in the middle of right now. That is actually our goal. So Looker actually does support Snowflake. We can easily import the data from those tools into Snowflake and then do that type of visualization in Looker. So the answer is that is on our plan, but we haven't committed to any of the other like Mixpanel or Amplitude yet.
Cool. So I guess also on your roadmap, do you plan to have AthenaHealth end customers use Looker directly or to embed Looker in your web application?
Yes. So internal customers they already are using Looker directly. We are exploring the ability to embed directly into our application right now.
Super
easy. On our roadmap.
Cool. All right. Does Looker or Snowflake have the ability to analyze data based on location? Can you display data on a map? Greg, I don't know if you guys use this, but do you want to take a first hack at it?
We have done that before, and you totally can do analysis based on location, and there is a map. There is a map chart that you can use. We haven't deployed any dashboards with it yet, but we've used it for ad hoc analysis.
Cool. Is there anything to add to that on the Snowflake or Looker end, Norris or Sakib?
I can just add to that Looker side, the map visualizations are built on CartoDB, so an open source library, and so they're zoomable and panable maps.
Cool. Okie dokie. So this person is wondering about the aggregation of raw data. Is that happening on the Snowflake or the Looker side in the raw data set?
So the aggregation of data is happening directly on Snowflake through transformations that we've built using LookML. So all the definitions of the aggregations are held in Looker as part of that larger dictionary that I talked about. All of the performance of doing those aggregations, all of the creating the aggregate tables and doing those rollups in SQL is done on the Snowflake database.
Got it. Cool. All right. So this is probably for Greg. Does LookML allow tweaks to logic to apply for over time? Basically, like from X to Y, these two fields mean this thing, but from A to B, they mean this thing. That makes sense.
That's a good question. We haven't played around with that yet, so I actually am not totally sure. We haven't tried to do anything like that just yet.
Yeah. I guess of my knowledge, that would be that if you could set something like that up in SQL, then you can set it up in LookML. Okie dokie. Norris. Is there an integration with R and or Python?
So Looker writes SQL on the back end, so all of the analysis that's executing its database is done in SQL. However, a lot of our customers, what they'll do is they'll take result sets or they'll model data out in Looker and then export those into R or a Python notebook for kind of any sort of deeper exploration, predictive analytics or anything like that. So that's how they're currently doing it.
Cool. All right. So then this one is, does Looker integrate with Redshift? And then I guess on the flip side of that is, does Snowflake integrate with Looker competitors?
I'll take a first stab at it. I mean, at the end of the day, we all work in a larger ecosystem. So, the answer is yes, we integrate with multiple partners. But there is a certain value of connecting Looker and Snowflake together, especially around data-driven applications and embed applications. And, we've had mutual successes together, as shown in the various labels that we have together. So I think this is a very strong partnership. All of us have to survive inside an ecosystem, and, we all do that. But that said, we're a very strong partner with Looker.
Cool. So I guess the short answer to that is...
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Norris. Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to echo Sakib's words there, that yes, Looker integrates with any SQL database, but however, the power and flexibility of that database is reflected directly in Looker. So the faster, more performant the database, the better Looker looks, for lack of a better pun. We're very, very happy about working with Snowflake on a number of customers here. We're very quick to introduce Snowflake into a variety of use cases because they have shown for our customers to be a tremendously powerful database.
Cool. And I know that we've been talking a lot about, or we talked a little bit about the embedded solution. Do you want to talk about how those two work so well together, or why that is?
Sure. Happy to start that off. So on the embedded analytics side, presenting data to your customers or vendors or partners in an embedded scenario, we've seen Looker and Snowflake actually be an especially good fit there because of what Greg touched on before, the separation of storage and compute. With embedded analytics, you will often see very high concurrency. So you're showing data to hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of users. So you really want to make sure that the performance is there even with very high concurrency loads. And because Snowflake can separate storage from compute, you can spin up a warehouse for any customer, for a number of customers, so that you can manage a load across those, while pointing at the same storage or the same data. So you don't have to move and reallocate data to every single warehouse to be able to support that. And because Looker is able to tap into that architecture natively, you can have one set of, if you have a single model and a single view into the data for all of those customers, you can put that one comprehensive data model overlaying all of those warehouses, so that you don't have to, again, replicate work that you've done for every single embedded customer.
And just to add to that too, Norris, that was great. From the perspective of Snowflake, frankly, the type of scalability we provide. So for a lot of these data-driven applications and embed applications, what ends up happening is they're developed in a smaller team, like 5-people team, and then they're rolled out to 500 or 5,000 people. Now imagine, like Norris said, dealing with that sort of concurrency and the ability to scale that sort of concurrency, accommodating various data sets, bringing that in, can only be done on a data warehouse which was built for the cloud and could take advantage of cloud features effectively. So in that perspective, Snowflake is able to scale really well. And on top of it, the fact that, as I think another gentleman had hinted before, how does Looker handle data aggregations? Well, Looker pushes those data aggregations to the database level where it can actually exploit some of the functionality being offered by Snowflake and the performance being offered by Snowflake. So that lends itself really well to the embed and data-driven applications.
Perfect. All right, so this person, I think, Greg, you might actually have an interesting take on this one. This person is currently using a BI platform that's full stack, and they like the idea of just having one vendor. What are the advantages of splitting that up into having 2 or 3 vendors?
That's a good question. So I think that from our perspective, it's really that we're able to, I guess I sort of subscribe to the belief that, so like in our experience with Snowflake, it's really, they as a vendor focus very heavily on backend, and so they're actually really good at that. And Looker focuses on the visualization and the data cataloging, and they're really good at that. And so and they partner together so well that it almost feels kind of like one full stack. So effectively, that's to me, that's really the benefit of it. I think specifically within the Looker Snowflake piece, again, I certainly and all of us on the team feel like it really represents kind of a full stack solution. So it's they partner really well together. We've had instances, for example, where the way Looker compiles a query onto Snowflake is actually not super performant, and we let them know, and they immediately get in touch with Snowflake and figure out the right way to format the query, which improves performance drastically. So I would actually say that it in a lot of ways feels like a full stack implementation.
Cool. Norris or Sakib, do you guys want to add to that at all? I will take your silence.
From the Looker side, I would say Greg hit that right on the button. I think we very much subscribe to kind of a best of breed approach. This is a hard space. Data is hard, so being able to focus on a limited scope of functionality allows us to be very good or the best in that area.
And I would just add that rather than having the one stack from one vendor sort of a policy, what solves your problem, right? If the problem is being solved by a tool, then or multiple tools put together really well, that's what you should use. And frankly, from our perspective, we have a great native integration with Looker. So, like Greg said, we're both able to ingest data from our customers and just understand what our customers need and really quickly turn around functionality. which really lends itself really well to the cloud-based approach of data analytics and solving customer problems. At the end of the day, this is all about solving a customer problem.
Agreed. Okay, Greg, are you using any of Looker's scheduling functionality?
Yes, we're using it for the transformations, the persistent derived tables that I talked about earlier. So we're using it in two ways. So one is just to have every so often, typically once a day, do a regeneration of the materialized transformation. And then the other way we're using it, we do have a few tables in Snowflake that we're actually updating more than once a day, just a couple. For those, we are using the functionality that looks at changes to the data, and based on underlying data, we'll rerun the transform.
Great. Okie-dokie. So, it sounds like this is another healthcare company, and they're asking about the HIPAA compliancy. I think there's a common sentiment that cloud is not necessarily HIPAA compliant. Can you maybe talk about a little that decision and that flow?
Yeah. So from the Snowflake perspective, we built a service which is completely HIPAA compliant. We'd be very willing to discuss BAA agreements and stuff. At the end of the day, we have multiple customers, especially with Looker, frankly, who are healthcare customers. And so, this stack works really well with customers bringing in HIPAA data and HIPAA compliant data. One of the good things, which works for Snowflake really well is that because we designed the whole system from scratch and we built the whole system from scratch, we had the option of, building it super secure from the beginning. And that's what we did. We didn't, think about security as a secondary option. We always built security into the whole environment. So, your data is completely encrypted through and through. It's kept, it's basically in a very HIPAA compliant sort of an environment with a SOC 2 Type 2 certification too. So, if there are any separate questions, we are very willing to answer those. But I think, we have been serving out this solution to a lot of customers.
Great.
Just to chime in on the Looker side quickly. So again, going back to architecture, the good thing about not storing or not moving any data into Looker is that data stays within the HIPAA compliant environment that you've already set up, right? In this case, Snowflake, Looker's querying the data where it sits. So there's no, you can deploy the Looker instance within that environment as well if you'd like. And that way, there's no actual data movement happening outside of your environment.
Perfect. All right, so we are at our time. So thank you so much to all of our presenters. If you'd like to learn more about either of the technologies discussed today, there are some links here on the screen. Snowflake.net is available for that. They just actually launched their new corporate website today. So even if you've been there in the past, you should go back and look at their new look and feel. You can also head to looker.com/demo to learn a little bit more about Looker. And if you wanted to learn more about embedded analytics in general, we are going to be another webinar on it on March 15th, and you can go to looker.com/events to learn more about that. Thank you again to Greg, Saqib, and Norris. You guys were very interesting and fantastic presenters, and thank you all for coming today. I hope you have a wonderful day.